She was screaming in a way that you can't even describe.
You're at a loss.
My job as mommy, I'm supposed to make her better, and I couldn't do that.
You've done everything that the doctor said, and why is this still happening? Why is this happening to our son?
We just thought if it's not clear to the experts,
I got pissed.
then where do we go next?
And I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Next, two medical mysteries that defied the experts. When 2-year-old Brooke Rohrer first tells her mom and dad that she's in pain, they don't think too much of it. Little do they know, they're about to come face to face with a parent's worst nightmare.
You can't keep those thoughts out of your mind that, you might lose a child.
Then, overnight, 18-month-old Craig Leopard's arms swell to triple their size. While his doctors dismiss the symptoms, his parents frantically search for a way to end their only child's agony.
I have never heard this type of screaming coming out of my son ever.
Todd and Julie Rohrer were married in the spring of 1996. They had one shared goal: to someday start a family.
Being a mom is what I've always wanted to do. In high school, my friends would say I want to do this and do that, and I just always answered I wanted to be a mom.
Settling into their new lives in Portland, Oregon, the young couple's first step is to establish themselves financially. While Todd builds a sporting goods business, Julie works as a flight attendant.
Our life just seemed to be really moving in a great forward direction.
4 years later, their son Miles is born. And in 2004, Julie gives birth to a happy, healthy daughter, Brooke.
And she was everything I wanted. I just felt like our family was complete.
Miles was the typical firstborn, patient, caring, attentive. Brooke was born instantly expecting things to be about Brooke.
She was a feisty, strong, sassy thing.
Of our two children, Brooke was certainly the more dramatic. She had that little actress in her.
The next few years go smoothly for the family of 4. But one day in the spring of 2007, Brooke comes to her mother with an unusual complaint.
Brooke came up to me and she said, "Mommy, my Russell hurts." I said, "What's your Russell? I don't know what a Russell is. Show me." And she was holding her right pelvic bone. And I said, "Did you bump it? Did you fall down?" And she said, "No." And I gave her a little rub and a little kiss and sent her on her way.
But over the next few days, Brooke continues to complain of pain in her right hip. Then Julie notices something odd about the way her daughter's moving.
She started walking a little funny. She would sort of hang her right hip back a little bit and wasn't quite walking in a normal way. And when she would drop her bunny, she would just squat, almost like a little old person, and reach out and grab it.
Brooke would occasionally say the same thing to Julie or to me, "My Russell hurts." And we still didn't know what Russell was. We would touch and feel and probe and hold her, but there was nothing there. No redness, no swelling. And in between times when she would tell us about this pain, she was a normal little girl. And that Brooke that we always wondered about, who had the actress in her, there was a side of you as a parent saying, "Is she looking for a little extra attention here?"
Unsure about what to do, Julie and Todd decide to wait and see if the problem goes away on its own. But just days later, while Brooke is playing with friends in the front yard, Julie's neighbor makes a troubling observation.
She said, "Julie, Brooke isn't out there tearing it up like she normally does." I said, "You're right." And I got down there and said, "Okay, Brooke, let's race." And tried to run alongside her, and she was doing this fast race walk, wiggle walk, where her right hip would hang back a little bit. And I said, let's run. And she said, "I am running, silly."
This seemed to be sort of a crystallizing moment where somebody who didn't see Brooke every hour of every day had noticed a dramatic change, and a change for the worse.
2 weeks after Brooke's first complaint, Julie schedules an appointment with her pediatrician.
I thought that they would find something relatively minor and then it wouldn't be a big deal.
The doctor performs a thorough exam and orders x-rays of Brooke's pelvic region. But the images reveal nothing out of the ordinary.
The doctor drew some blood just to see if there was anything off with her blood, any inflammation or anything funny. It all came back good.
Unable to find anything wrong, the pediatrician suggests that Brooke may simply be experiencing growing pains.
I was thinking, I don't remember this type of pain with my son, and I don't remember my friends' kids having pain like this, and everybody grows. But knowing that the blood looked good and the x-rays looked good, I thought her pain will go away and everything will be all right.
But the very next night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, things take a terrifying turn.
She was screaming in a way that you can't even describe, and you're awake instantly.
I picked her up, and it reminded me of a scared cat, and they just sink their claws into you. She said, "Owie, owie, owie," and she'd put her head down on my shoulder and fall asleep. And then 20 minutes later, it happened again. And then an hour later, it would happen again. I was, "Mommy, I'm supposed to be able to kiss the boo-boos and make her better," and I couldn't do that. And to watch her in so much pain was so frustrating.
Worried that something could be seriously wrong with their daughter, the Rohrers scheduled an emergency appointment with a local pediatric orthopedist.
It seemed to make a lot of sense. Here's somebody who's going to be expert at spotting injuries on x-rays. We certainly were hoping that here's the answer.
But after thoroughly examining the little girl, the doctor can't find a single thing wrong with her.
He told us he couldn't help us, and I just thought, we're back to the drawing board.
You know, you just thought, God, you know, you're supposed to be getting some answers. And if it's not clear to the experts, then where do we go next?
From the moment New Jersey natives Tracy and Mike Leppert decided to get married, they knew they wanted to be parents. And just 2 years after tying the knot, the young couple gets the news they have been waiting for.
We found out that we were pregnant, and we were so ecstatic. We were so excited.
Then, on September 28, 1990, Tracy goes into labor, and within 10 hours gives birth to a seemingly healthy son they name Craig.
When Craig was born, he was fine, 10 toes, 10 fingers, healthy boy. I was so excited to be a mother for the first time, also scared being a young mother.
I always felt like I was nervous and maybe overprotective of what was going on with him.
But Tracy and Mike quickly adapt to parenthood and find immense pleasure in watching the newborn discover the world.
Craig was always a great baby. He seemed to always have a good time and laugh.
I was a stay-at-home mom, so to pass the time, we would go over to the community pool. Craig always had fun in the water, loved splashing around and just, putting his feet in, splashing away.
But when Craig is 18 months old, one of those fun and seemingly ordinary afternoons at the pool suddenly turns into Tracy's worst nightmare.
We were there probably for about 25 minutes, and out of the blue, he just started to cry. I was just shocked. I did not know where the crying was coming from. I rushed Craig out of the water and checked him over. I was looking for cuts, bruises, scrapes, anything that I could see that I did not see happen in front of me. I did not find anything. After we got back to the apartment, I took everything off of him. I said, maybe it is a sunburn, and let me get a wet washcloth with some cool water and wipe him down. He still continued to scream, and I started to panic. I have never heard this type of screaming coming out of my son ever.
Tracy quickly prepares a cool bath for Craig, hoping the water will soothe the sunburn and relax him. But it only seems to make things worse.
To hear that type of scream, like your mind just starts rambling, what is happening to my child? You want to help them and make them feel better, but what I'm doing is not helping them. You start to get petrified.
Frantic, the new mother calls Craig's pediatrician and gives him a detailed account of the events at the pool. But the doctor doesn't seem too concerned.
The pediatrician told me, even though if he doesn't seem better, if this is out of the ordinary, I would like to see him the next day.
When I got home from work that night, Craig was extremely unpleasant. He was crying for, gosh, it seemed like hours. He just was so uncomfortable. I mean, it was in his face. You could just see it that this was your kid that just isn't supposed to act like this.
The ear-splitting screams are almost unbearable, and Tracy and Mike are beside themselves, wondering if they can even wait till morning to take him in to see the doctor. Then, just as it seems they've reached their wits' end, Craig settles down.
At some point, he had calmed down and gone to sleep. So I thought everything would be fine.
But as the young parents discover the next morning, their child is far from fine.
We looked down at him, and there is his arms, swollen like tree trunks with all these spots on them. Mike and I looked at each other and said, there's something wrong here.
For the last month, 3-year-old Brooke Rohrer has been complaining off and on about intense pain in her pelvis and hip. And while her doctors insist that she's perfectly healthy, her parents aren't buying it.
I was over feeling that it was going to just work itself out and go away. It had been many weeks, and it wasn't getting better.
Now that we were paying so much more attention to Brooke's day-to-day activity, it was clear that she was in more frequent pain than she had been in the past, and she was kind of shutting down.
Desperate for answers, Julie and Todd check in with a new specialist, a pediatric surgeon.
We filled her in on the whole history, and she said, I'd like an x-ray of her abdomen. And we weren't sure what she was going for at that point, but we went, got it back right away, and she sat with us and she said, I think I've found the source of your daughter's pain. She said, I think she's constipated.
The doctor explains to the Rohrers that severe constipation can often cause sharp pains in and around the abdominal area.
It was such a relief to hear that the solution was so simple. All we needed to do was make sure she was having a little more fruit in her diet.
I said, wow, that's shocking, because I wipe her bottom every day and I know that she goes every day. She said she's dropping off boxcars, but the train hasn't left the station. You just want to move it all out.
The doctor instructs the Rohrers to give Brooke over-the-counter laxatives and suppositories. And at first, the treatment seems to work.
She seemed to be more comfortable. And we thought, gosh, maybe this is it. How wonderful if it's that simple.
But within 2 days, any hope that Brooke's problem is easy enough to solve with a laxative is gone.
It only took another episode to think maybe that this really wasn't the answer. I was laying on the couch, and Brookie was laying on her back on top of me, and Julie came in to help get her pajamas on.
I grabbed her leg, and she shot out such a squeal of pain from me moving her leg. Oh, I thought I heard her, but it was such a small, normal movement. That shouldn't hurt.
At their wits' end, the Rohrers make another appointment, this time with a pediatric rheumatologist. But after giving Brooke a thorough exam, he's also stumped. Then Julie has an idea. She prompts her daughter to do something she knows will trigger an episode.
I grabbed her special bunny and I dropped Bunny on the floor. And I said, pick up Bunny, and she did that slow ginger squat vertical back thing, and he was just like, wow, that's not right. That's not normal.
The doctor suggests that they run an MRI on Brooke so he can get a better look at her hip and the surrounding area.
I thought, this is going to bring us some answers. This is what we want. We're going to find out what's wrong.
The waiting was torturous. If you allow it to, it can just be all-consuming. And if your mind runs, you don't want to think about those things.
A long hour later, the doctor returns with the results.
He seemed a little somber, and that scared me. And he said, well, there are some findings. And I was so relieved. Finally, an answer.
But nothing could have prepared the worried parents for what he tells them next.
He said her L4 vertebrae is collapsed. And I remember feeling so shocked. Collapsed? He said it's just basically not there. It's a thin little layer of bone. It's shocking to see it because you see this beautiful spine, vertebrae disc, and then you get to her lumbar region and it's just a sliver of bone.
The doctor goes on to explain that the vertebra hasn't simply broken, it's disintegrated. And the implications of such a finding are beyond anything they could have imagined.
He said there's a list of things that it could be. None of them are good. Everything that he had to say ended in oma, emia, no words that you wanted to hear at all.
The room was just spinning. I didn't want to hear what he was saying. It was very, it was terrifying. It really was.
You can't keep those thoughts out of your mind that you might lose a child.
Tracy and Mike Leppard have just witnessed something they never thought possible. Literally overnight, their 18-month-old son's tiny arms have tripled in size.
So we wrapped Craig up, bundled him up, and put him in the car and rushed over to the pediatric doctor.
The worried parents are both hoping for a simple answer to the severe swelling and crying fits. And after performing a complete exam, the doctor is confident he knows what's behind it.
The doctor found nothing out of the ordinary. He told me Craig probably had a reaction to the high levels of chlorine in the pool.
He prescribes an antihistamine to help bring down the swelling and assures Tracy that Craig will be just fine. In fact, he can return to the pool in 3 days, once the chlorine levels have stabilized.
As soon as we heard from the doctor that he felt it was the chlorine, it was a sigh of relief that there was nothing more that we really need to worry about.
That day, after a few hours, the swelling did seem to go down due to the medicine, and Craig was being back to his normal self. I thought at that point everything was going to be okay.
But a few weeks later, when Tracy decides it's finally safe to bring Craig back to the pool, the screaming and swelling start all over again.
We didn't know what the heck was going on, and we couldn't figure it out. He's got to be allergic to something, so what else could he be doing?
Tracy takes Craig back to the doctor, but she's frustrated by the level of care.
The doctor gave Craig the normal examination like he would do with any other child. Never took any allergy tests or any skin tests. I was getting very concerned that the doctor could not figure out what was going wrong. I knew Craig was suffering, and I'm his mom, and I'm supposed to help him and protect him, and I felt like I was not doing my job.
Convinced the doctor isn't doing all he can to help their son, Tracy and Mike take matters into their own hands.
We didn't know at this point if there was possible germs or any infectious diseases in the pool, that maybe that's what was happening to him. We bought our own kiddie pool, filled it up with our own water, and put it on the side of the apartment. We didn't know if this was going to be the answer, but we knew we could have more things in our control, and we hopefully could stop some of what was happening.
At first, the toddler seems to be having fun splashing around in the water. But just as the parents begin to relax, Craig once again erupts.
Almost like clockwork again, after 25 minutes or so in the kiddie pool, he started to cry. I picked him up, brought him inside, and that's when he started to scratch his skin, like he wanted to rip his skin off.
He was in such pain and such discomfort. It was extremely difficult for both of us to go through it, just to watch it, especially as such young parents as we were.
Tracy quickly tracks down another pediatrician and rushes Craig over to his office. This doctor gives the anxious mother a new diagnosis.
This doctor thought it was maybe an additive in the laundry detergent that was causing Craig to have an allergic reaction. The doctor recommended to try to find a sensitive skin laundry detergent, even though I was already using a baby detergent. Again, I'm not the doctor, I'm the mom, and you do what the doctor says, and so I went out and bought a different detergent. Mike and I were both hoping that maybe this is our saving grace.
As summer turns into autumn, Tracy experiments with various detergents and eventually finds one that seems to do the trick.
We thought we figured out what it was. It looks like Craig's happy. Everything was fine. He was running around like a normal kid, sleeping through the night. Life was good.
Then, in January 1993, Mike gets a new job that requires a move to Albany, New York. It's an exciting time for the young family.
Craig adjusted really well to moving to Albany with the cold weathers and playing in the snow, and he was just having a ball.
Shortly after moving to New York, the couple gets more happy news when Tracy discovers she's pregnant again. The next 9 months seem to fly by, and on July 19, 1994, Tracy gives birth to a little girl they name Nicole.
It was pretty exciting because we always wanted to have this second one, and obviously we wanted to have a girl at this point.
The Leopards are grateful to have what seems like two healthy children, but they miss their extended families. So in July of 1995, they decide to move back home.
I had an opportunity to accept a promotion and a transfer back to the great state of New Jersey, and I took it. It was great. I had a great job. I had a house, 2 great kids, a beautiful wife. I couldn't ask for anything more.
But just a month after moving into their new house, their seemingly perfect life turns into an all too familiar nightmare.
Craig was outside with his friends playing in the front yard. Everything was fine. All of a sudden, he just came running through the front door, just screaming at the top of his lungs. His screaming was so intense and so loud, like we've never heard in our entire lives.
It's an attack that Craig will never forget.
One thing that I do remember is the feeling of not knowing, even as a little kid. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew I was in a lot of pain. I just didn't understand what had happened to my body.
Craig was complaining that his arms and limbs and face were on fire. We thought maybe it was a possible sunburn that just did not come out yet, that we could not see. We wiped him down with a wet washcloth to try and cool any body part that might have been affecting him, and nothing seemed to be working. It was getting later in the day that day, so we decided we would call the doctor and make an appointment the first thing the next morning.
Tracy laid in bed with him the entire night, trying to soothe him.
The worried mother hopes that her 5-year-old son will be okay by morning. But come daylight, it's clear that things have gotten much worse.
We woke up the next morning, and that's when I saw his arms and hands were so swollen, they looked like boxing gloves that you couldn't even pinch any skin on his arms or hands. They were purple. I was very scared.
I just remembered that visual of his hands. Just looking at he wasn't crying. He just had it. He had these hands that were just puffed up, and I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Julie and Todd Rohrer have just received devastating news. An MRI suggests their 3-year-old daughter, Brooke, is suffering from some form of degenerative disease, possibly cancer. Now, they're on their way to the Pediatric Oncology and Hematology Department at the hospital to find out exactly what they're dealing with.
I remember stopping at the doors of the oncology clinic and just staring at the sign on the door. And I just felt what happened to my life.
They're greeted by oncology and hematology specialist, Dr. Kevin Norwood.
The Rohrers were apprehensive, and anyone that walks into my office fears the worst until told otherwise. And so they were fearing for their child's life.
Dr. Norwood explains they'll need to conduct a biopsy of the tissue near the disintegrated vertebra to determine whether or not Brooke has cancer.
Knowing that they're going into her spine was pretty scary. Could she be paralyzed after this?
We got to the pediatric sedation unit, and Brookie climbed onto my lap, and we held each other as tight as we could.
And of course she's scared, and I remember telling Brooke, they're getting closer to finding out why you're hurting.
The procedure goes off without a hitch. Now all the family can do is wait.
It's hard to keep your focus when the most important thing is your daughter going to be okay? Waiting for that day to arrive. You want it to be here, and you don't ever want it to come.
It's the longest week of the Rohrer's life, but 7 days after the biopsy, the results are finally in.
I was standing in the kitchen, it was evening time, and they called and said that they had some answers. They did have a diagnosis.
In Brooke's case, the tissue was sent down to the pathology department and stained, and through a battery of tests and stains that were performed on this, it was determined that she had Langerhans cell histiocytosis.
Langerhans cell histiocytosis, or LCH, is a rare blood disorder caused by an abnormality in a histiocyte, a type of white blood cell. In a healthy patient, histiocytes act as the body's frontline defense against infection. But in a patient with LCH, histiocytes become overactive, attacking and destroying the body's healthy tissue and organs. Unfortunately, the cause of LCH is unknown.
We do not know why Langerhans cell histiocytosis affects anyone. What we do know is that it's sort of an abnormality of the immune system. Langerhans cell histiocytosis would not be a classification of a cancer.
There was a little bit of relief that it wasn't one of the OMAs. We were a little more hopeful that, this is just something we're going to get through.
Dr. Norwood explains that LCH differs from cancer in an important regard. Unlike cancer cells, rogue histiocytes are not mutated or bad cells. On the contrary, they're good cells behaving badly.
In Brooke's case, they attacked her vertebra and pretty much ate the bone out from inside out, and the bone collapsed.
As the bone disintegrated, the area around it became inflamed and put pressure on the nerve connected to her hip.
The nerve roots that come out of the spine innervate all of the skin surface around her buttocks, all around her hip, and bending over would probably cause more irritation of that nerve and could cause excruciating pain.
They explained to us that it was radiating pain or referred pain.
All of a sudden, we understood why her Russell hurt.
But until he performs a full bone scan, Dr. Norwood won't know the extent of Brooke's disease. The LCH may be localized in that one section of her spine, or it could have spread throughout her entire body. And if it's not caught in time, the results could be grim.
Langerhans cell histiocytosis is fatal because it starts to spread, and the cells start to increase in number. And maybe they start to spread to the liver, they start to spread to the spleen, they start to spread to the bone marrow, and then you start to have failure of primary organs, and that can cause your death.
We just cried. The first day or two, I think I walked around in such shock. Our biggest fear was losing Brooke.
Tracy Leppert are terrified. Their 5-year-old son's hands are so swollen, they look like purple boxing gloves.
I told Tracy, I'm taking him to the doctor. All this stuff about, hey, it could be a reaction, this and that. That's, I got pissed.
We decided to pull out the book and find a local pediatrician that was closest to the house that we can get the fastest to, and that's how we picked Dr. Cervellis.
His father brought him to the office with a complaint that he will start screaming like he is in pain, and he breaks out in a skin rash. It is very rare for a parent to bring the child in with this kind of symptomatology.
Dr. Cervellis was definitely taken aback by the swelling in Craig's hands. It was obviously wasn't something that he normally saw in terms of any type of reaction.
I wasn't sure, with the diagnosis yet. It's very frustrating to have a child walking in your office and the parents looking for answers, and you cannot help them.
The only thing Dr. Stavrelis can do is give them a medicated cream to help relieve the bizarre swelling. But he promises that he'll do all he can to help the distraught parents get to the bottom of the case. He just needs some time.
One of the reasons I went into medicine is to find answers to people's problems. I was very intrigued by the severity of the symptoms, and I really wanted to help Craig and his family. I went to the library and searched all the textbooks and the literature to pinpoint exactly what was the condition of Craig.
After spending days trying to put together a list of possible culprits, he finally comes across an extremely rare disease that seems eerily similar to what Craig has been going through.
The symptoms were almost identical. Extreme pain, burning sensation on the skin, and in a few minutes, redness and swelling of the exposed parts of the skin. I called Craig's mother and I gave her the news that I think I have the answer for her child's condition.
I only found about 4 lines in a medical dictionary, but as soon as I read it, I knew this is what it was. I just started to cry. This is finally the answer to our prayers.
Because Craig's condition was above and beyond my specialty, I advised Craig's father to find a specialist.
The Leopards quickly locate an expert in their area, dermatologist Dr. Maureen Poe.
To make this particular diagnosis, the best test is a blood test. So we drew some blood and took it straight to the laboratory. We are looking for a molecule that's involved in the biosynthesis of heme, called protoporphyrin.
Heme, an essential chemical in the blood, helps carry oxygen through the body.
If we found that protoporphyrin molecule to be elevated in Craig's blood, we would have a diagnosis.
I was terrified at this point because our son never had a blood test done in his life, and this is a life-altering disease that we might have to deal with for the rest of our lives.
5 days later, the findings come in, and sure enough, they confirm Dr. Stavrelis' initial hunch.
The protoporphyrin was very high. This confirms a diagnosis of erythropoietic protoporphyria.
Erythropoietic protoporphyria, or EPP, is an extremely rare condition in which the body becomes hypersensitive to sunlight. Patients with EPP have a malfunction in the enzyme that converts light-sensitive molecules, called protoporphyrins, into heme. As a result, these molecules overaccumulate within the body, and when they are exposed to sunlight through the skin, toxic photochemical reactions occur.
The best way I can explain my burn is really if you were to take your hand and accidentally put it on a hot stove, and to take that burn and to cut it with a knife. I'd rather break a bone than be burned by the sun.
Family members were reassuring me that it's going to be all right. You know, we'll get through it. It'll be tough, but we'll get through it.
Suddenly, Craig's seemingly random attacks make sense. All those afternoons by the pool triggered the initial episodes, and they only tapered off when the family moved to a cooler climate, where he was less exposed to the sun's intense rays.
We were very happy that we understood what it was that he had. But we were also really scared as to what it meant.
And the family has good reason to be worried. The buildup of protoporphyrin molecules in the body can lead to a life-threatening situation.
The protoporphyrin molecule in the plasma is removed by the liver. The liver then excretes the protoporphyrin into the bile, where it is removed from the body in the bowel movements. This is a toxic process for the liver. A small number of people with protoporphyria will develop liver dysfunction, and this can be progressive to the point of total liver failure.
Making matters worse, there is no recommended cure for EPP. But Dr. Poe assures the Leopards that Craig can lead a relatively normal life if he follows one simple rule.
Treatment for EPP begins with sunlight avoidance.
At this point, I was like, how are we gonna do this? This is gonna be so difficult. How can you not go outside? You can't just tell your kids, get up and go play outside. You just can't do that. It's a life-altering change.
As the family adjusts to their new reality, Tracy and Mike wonder why so many doctors misread Craig's symptoms.
Erythropoietic protoporphyria is a rare disorder. It occurs in about 0.001% of the population. EPP was only described in 1961, so doctors are still learning about it as a diagnosis.
Julie and Todd Rohrer have just learned that their 3-year-old daughter, Brooke, has Langerhans cell histiocytosis, a rare blood disorder in which disease-fighting cells called histiocytes are attacking her spine. Now they're waiting for the results of a bone scan that will tell them if the disease has spread to other parts of her body.
It's this mix of hope and fear. You want the answer, but you're so scared to death of what you're going to hear.
When we finally got the results of the bone scan, she only had evidence of LCH in 2 places: the original spot with a collapsed vertebrae and a small spot on her right femur.
Dr. Norwood explains that Brooke will need to undergo chemotherapy. But unlike treatment for most forms of cancer, patients with LCH are administered a relatively low dose of chemo in order to suppress the immune system.
Primarily, Brooke's chemotherapy was supposed to weaken the histiocytes, so they would stop attacking her body.
Brooke will also take a steroid to help reduce the inflammation around the nerve that's been causing her so much pain.
We knew we were in for a pretty long road of treatment.
3 weeks after her diagnosis, Brooke bravely begins the first round of chemotherapy. But the Rohrers know that the treatment also carries serious risks.
The therapy alone can cause you to have a more weakened immune system, so therefore you could die from a secondary infection.
It's a rough few months for the Rohrers, but after 12 arduous chemo sessions, the lesion in Brooke's femur finally begins to shrink. Eventually, she shifted to chemotherapy once every 3 weeks. And by the end of the year, things are definitely looking up.
She finished out the protocol. There's no active disease.
She responded well to the treatment. She had an improvement in her pain symptoms. Her overall outcome is 80% chance for survival. Brooke is still being evaluated every 3 months because there is a chance for Langerhans cell histiocytosis to return.
While it's hard to say how the disease will play out in Brooke's life, Dr. Norwood believes she won't have to limit her physical activity. In fact, part of her vertebra may ultimately regenerate on its own.
I hope that Brooke doesn't have any more pain and that she just grows to be a thriving, lovely, beautiful person.
With Brooke finally past the crisis, the Rohrers can't help wondering how so many doctors failed to diagnose her disease in the first place.
I thought, gosh, how did they miss this? We have x-rays of her spine.
Brooke's diagnosis took a while because when she was initially evaluated, all of the signs with what were seen on the MRI were not yet there. And Langerhans cell histiocytosis is seen in 3 to 5 per million children, meaning it's rare, very rare.
Today, nearly 2 years after her first symptoms set in, Brooke is thriving. But the Rohrers know there are no guarantees, and they're committed to giving their daughter the fullest life possible.
Right now, she's doing great. She's signed up for swimming lessons for the first time, and she's loving that.
If you didn't know better, you'd think she was just a normal little girl. She's never lost that spunk and sassiness that is her very nature.
Getting a diagnosis like that certainly does put things in perspective. We've certainly learned to not sweat the small stuff and let the small stuff run off our back because we've seen big stuff at this point, and we know the difference.
Today, 17-year-old Craig is a senior in high school and an inspiration to all his classmates.
I don't let EPP ruin my life. I mean, it's something very hard to have to live with. But at the same time, I think I do a lot of stuff that a lot of other kids do. And saying that, I mean, I play football, which is something that you're outside every day during practice.
And Craig, a linebacker, has learned that he can practice with his team for about 1 hour at a time, as long as he's covered in 65 SPF titanium oxide suntan lotion and every inch of his skin is shielded.
Before every practice, I have to put on a turtleneck, long stockings, like undergarments, gloves on my hands, and then I have to wear a tinted visor on my face mask to keep the sun from hitting my face.
Craig's relentless determination to be part of the team has inspired the entire community. They raised nearly $150,000 to put up lights on the high school football field so that Craig can play in all of the home games at night.
My family and my friends, and especially the community, have really made me feel like a regular person. And I think that's really important to me.
We put canopies outside. We put a whole theater down in our basement because we like to watch a lot of movies.
If your family's that important to you, then you adapt to what your family's capable or not capable of doing.
You can't live life pissed off, and you can't live life mad, and you can't feel sorry for yourself. And to be able to sit there and not regret anything, well, I think that's the American dream.